that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Demian by Hesse. Now, I don't know exactly how to describe this book. I'm not even particularly sure why I picked it up. I've heard it in the classical areas, and I've been trying to read more broadly outside of just, what I'm comfortable in. So I picked this up. It was pretty cheap. And again, I feel under prepared for this. Like, I feel like I'm not worthy of speaking about this, because I'm a simple man trying to make his way through the universe. But ultimately, it's a coming-of-age story. It's also very abstract, I think, if I understood it correctly. But we follow this person named Sinclair. It's very much in a retrospective format, so somebody who's already an adult. We begin with him as a kid, a teenager, and then adult. Very typical coming-of-age sort of thing. And you see this a lot in subgenres too. Like, there's a lot of coming-of-ages in fantasy, like what I typically read. But this is very focused on that specifically, but it's also very philosophical. In fact, I'd say this book is more philosophy than it is a proper story. Like, there is a story, but it's not the thing you're really coming for. It kind of reminds me of God Emperor of Dune, where like 80% of its philosophical meanderings. It does tie into the theme of adolescence, though, and growing up. I mean, it's very introspective, and I think not everybody's gonna have that same experience, but I know definitely for me, I've certainly had a lot of those deep philosophical thoughts with myself. And I think the most profound thing from all of this is just that this was written like early in the 19th century, forget 1999 when I wasn't even born. All of it, I didn't exist. And yet, no matter what time period, we all kind of deal with similar things. So I think that's pretty profound. And did I enjoy my experience with this book? I mean, I enjoyed engaging with the text. I enjoyed when I agreed with something or when I didn't, which I think was a little bit more fun. But I don't know if I particularly enjoyed myself throughout. But it had my brain going, which I think is the more important thing. So, I'm glad I did it. But I can't say I particularly loved it either. So, that's pretty much it for non-spoilers. I mean, I kind of want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but like I said, it's very abstract. It's very, I think it's cerebral. I mean, some of these characters could be real, some of them could be not. I'm going to go with not. But it's all kind of just this exploration of, his adolescence to questioning certain things. And I think ultimately the main idea of this book that might resonate with you if you decide to read it is whether you're super atheistic, whether you're spiritual, whether you have a devout faith. I think what's important is to, as this book kind of gets into, finding yourself. You can say you're a Christian, you can say you're a Muslim, and there's certain connotations that are going to immediately come with that if you say that to someone. But at the same time, you are an individual. And for me, again, I have a faith. So I think part of it is a little bit more difficult to if it does not contradict Scripture for me, it's not saying this applies to you explicitly, it's okay to not be the same. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be unhappy and still follow Christ. It's okay to be depressed and still follow Christ. It's okay to not fit in with the typical churchgoer, as you might say, and still perfectly align with their values to an extent. And this applies to really anything, whether it's religious or not. It's always be thinking. You don't have to be a skeptic, but always have your mind open, because the only way to grow is to learn. And I know this is typical stuff. You heard this in high school. You heard this in middle school. You've heard this all your life. But it's important to remember, because you get so, especially as you become an adult, you get so stuck in the minutia of things. But even some of the mundane things kind of help you and evolve you into whoever you're meant to be becoming. And for some people, it's really easy to fall into that routine, fall in love, pursue a dream. But for others, they're always stuck in their head. And you got to actualize the things that you desire to do. And I'm trying to be vague. I'm getting into spoilers primarily, but I think if you are interested in exploring adolescence through a more philosophical lens and finding yourself, in a sense. I mean, I think there are people of all ages that can kind of understand that. I'm 24. At the time that you're watching this, I'm 25 now, which means I'm a quarter of a century old. And there are people that are 30, there are people that are 40, there are people that are 50, they're still figuring out who they are to this day, and older. I don't think you ever truly find it. I think it's a bit of a lifelong journey, But I'm glad I read it. I think it made me think a lot. If I have to be honest, I can't say that I was, throughout my reading experience, enjoying it. But it did make me think. And sometimes I don't need to be having fun. I want a work to make me think. Now I think there are certain works that do both in one, like Dune or Malazan, But I think it's okay sometimes to just have one that's kind of, because this is still fiction. This isn't a nonfiction piece, but it is very much more about you thinking than it is about necessarily. I mean, I do think you feel things near the end of the book, but I'm meandering now. So this is what you get when you have an unedited, off-the-cuff speaking. Because as you know, I don't have a script. I write down bullet points and things that I don't mind a chicken scratch that are particularly interesting to me or that I think might be important, and then I hit record and go. So, but that's it for non-spoiler. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. You should check it out. You can get it for very cheap, and it's only 100-something pages. You can finish it in a day if you have the time. So, not that it's a rush. It's all about the journey, but it's a very short read. So, this will either be before or after. I forget how. But I'm also reviewing A Call to Arms by Hemingway, because I've heard that name many times around the classic literature circles. So we'll see how that goes. Again, drifting off of my comfort zone before returning with Von Roycroft's bold ascension of the Severing Sun books, which is fantasy, and I'm more used to that. But yeah. It was an interesting time. I'm glad I read it. I'll just spoilers. In the beginning, we have the duality of the comfort structure of home versus reality. Now, this won't apply to everyone. Unfortunately, some people had reality struck upon them much faster than they probably should have had. But also for many, so it won't apply to everyone. But I think a vast majority of, there's an unfortunate few, and I'm really sorry for those who had to grow up a lot faster. But typically, as you're growing up, you have that sort of, that bliss of childhood where you have no worries, you have no concerns, you were just living. And, with his particular thing, it's back in the day, so everybody's religious, right? So he has that structure, he has that good things, bad things, orderly in a household. And while he enjoyed that, he appreciated that about his family, he kind of found it a bit divine in a sense. But at the same time, any other time that he wasn't in the home, he was seeing reality. He was seeing, hookers or drunks or this or that or every despicable thing under the sun that you can think of, and just normal everyday debauchery that you wouldn't necessarily inherently think is a terrible thing, just, something that people do for fun. It's still different from what he grew up in. And what he found more enticing, of course, is the things that were supposed to be detestable. Which, I just have to say, that's from my perspective. People always imagine the devil being a horn with being all red and scary, and that's not really a Bible idea. That's a people idea. Because the devil will look beautiful, not scary. Which I think a bit, and again, Herman Hesse is not dealing with religion inherently in here. He's not. He's definitely not religious, or at least he could be religious. He's not Christian, at least as far as this book seems to suggest. Or maybe it's just his character who's not. But still, the devil will look beautiful, not scary. So just because everything else that's not your upbringing of religiosity is more enticing does not inherently make it better. I mean, listen, drugs can be pretty enticing. It doesn't necessarily mean you should partake. Now, the big part of this book is, at least early on in his childhood, he does something bad. Read the book and find out. It's not that bad, but he gets blackmailed by a fellow student who is a lot poorer than him, because he's in a rather rich family, rather well-off family, and the kid is not. So he's like, listen, I'm a nice guy. I don't want to put you in jail, but also at the same time, I'm poor. So, like, why don't you just go steal stuff from your house and give it to me, This is also when he comes to meet a guy named Max Demian, which sounds very similar to demon, right? But does Max actually exist? I don't know. In fact, I'm inclined to believe he doesn't. One of the biggest things that kind of gets Sinclair's mind rolling even faster is that Max claims people made up the story of Cain because of bigotry. That Cain and his ilk, they had a mark on their face. And they were actually the good ones all along. And that the Bible's wrong, but they were not bad guys. And that it's actually just a bunch of people came together and disliked what he had to say or what he did, so they just made him out to be the villain. So this, again, it begins to make him doubt. And whether or not it's all speculation. No way to know. Like, I can't say as a Christian, like, oh, this is true, absolutely, because I wasn't there. What I always say as a Christian is that I believe the Bible beyond a reasonable doubt based on the evidence that I have seen and looked into, which doesn't mean it's 100%. But so basically, on my end, if Jesus died and rose from the dead, right? If that actually happened, then I'm going to trust anything that guy says, because he's the only one who have done that, and that lends a lot of credence to him as opposed to other people. If he didn't, then it doesn't matter, so it's bluey. But if he did, he said that the Old Testament is trustworthy. So whether or not I can actually see the Old Testament or not, I can trust it. That's a whole other thing. I'm just saying. So I won't fight anybody back to back on the claims of Cain in this book, but I don't even think it's not the point of it. It's the doubting, which everybody's going to experience at some point in terms of faith, if they even have one growing up. Because, like, as for me, my parents were not religious. I had the complete opposite experience of this. First off, my biological father was not in the picture. My mom was with my stepfather for many years before they eventually got married. I got to be the ring bearer, which is pretty sick, because I was 9 when they got married. But they were not religious in the slightest. They don't have any faith. My mom has said the one time we've ever had a serious conversation about this, perhaps she believes in something higher. Simply because the natural inclination of everything coming from nothing is silly to most people, and that there has to be a reason behind it. But she definitely does not ascribe to any particular religion, especially not Christianity. And my stepfather is of Jewish by blood and Chumash Native American descent, which, they have their spirituality in there. My dad does not ascribe to either, but he lights the menorah every year. And he's gone to powwows. I've gone to powwows because of it. I got to meet Pocahontas, by the way. Sad fact, she did not sing any of her songs. In case you didn't know that, that was a white lady. Sad to say, because I asked her about her singing. Because I said, she sounds a lot different in person. She's like, oh, well, that's because I only did the dialogue. I can't sing. And I was like, that's really sad to know. Really big side tangent. But the point being, I did not grow up religious. I did not pick up a Bible until middle school. And that's only because my friend said, come to youth group, and then you could get free food. And I'm like, free food? That sounds nice. And slowly but surely from there, it's a whole other thing. That is not the point of this video. But, I found my own way. Much as Sinclair's meant to find his own in this book. But I'm just saying, for perspective, he grew up in a house that was, from the very beginning, religious. I grew up in a home that wasn't in the slightest, that couldn't be further away from that aspect of life. But regardless of that starting point, we had complete opposite ends, but at some point we both had doubts, and we both had skeptics, and we both had things brought to our attention that made us go, whoa, wait a second, is this worth following or is it not? And so really, all that to say, the story of this Cain thing, this whole thing that gets brought up, is ultimately just an exploration for him to delve into himself, about what he actually believes. There's also this idea, maybe Demian, that there's no free will. But if you exercise your dreams or your passion or your desire so strongly, you can manifest it into reality, essentially, is sort of the idea. I'm kind of simplifying it, but while it's interesting philosophical gibberish, at the end of the day, if you can somehow escape the barrier of determinism to actuate your own reality, then it is not some metaphysical thing. You simply have free will. It is simply simpler. What's the skeptics always say? Go with the simplest explanation, only go with the more complicated, if the evidence makes sense. It may be anecdotal, and maybe we all don't have free will, but if your natural impulse, your natural inclination is that you make choices, then you make choices. And again, how can anybody ever be held accountable for the things they do if there is no free will? You can't hold somebody in contempt for doing what they had no other choice but to do, you see. But that's not really what this book is about. But it's an interesting thought. The prose was written so well, I enjoyed reading it. But if you actually stop and think about it, it's actually just quite silly. Maybe it's a debate for another time. I'm sure it will come up again when I read The Second Apocalypse by R. Scott Bakker, but I do not agree about this whole lack of free will notion. And then the next thing Demian brings up is the thief on the cross. And he tries to get across to Sinclair that, in fact, first off, the story isn't even real, but even if it is, the thief that was on the other side is actually the one to be revered. Because the thief on the cross was a whimpering coward who begged for forgiveness at the last second, but the other guy, he at least held true to his convictions all the way through. So he's the one to be admired. Ultimately, what that sounds like, if anything, it reminds me of the Judge Holden, from the Cormac McCarthy novel Blood Meridian, or Evening Redness in the West. And again, this is more just of an idea of skepticism and questioning and growing, and I get that. But yeah, that was another big, I think, a big moment for Sinclair in this book. I can talk about my own personal gripes about that, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Actually, I think the more interesting part for me was that it could all be a story and not true at all. I mean, right, how would the apostles hear about? it actually made me question myself for a second. How would the apostles write down this story about the thief on the cross? They wouldn't be able to hear. They probably weren't talking very loud up there. And there's a whole bunch of crowds talking. How would they have heard this intimate conversation between the thief on the cross and Jesus? Well, it is a fabrication. It has to be if Jesus is just dead. Right? It has to be made up, because how could they have heard that? Sure, it does get the religious stuff going on. You know, it sounds like something you would make up to make it sound like, oh yeah, doesn't this climax, doesn't it sound like fantastic to put in there at the last second, like, oh yeah. But the problem with that is the assumption that it's untrue from the get-go. But if it is true, if Jesus rose from the dead, then there was like a week where he could have told that story to someone. And that's why they have that story in there. Who knows? Let me move on. Sorry. He meets another guy. He kind of, him and Demian stop talking for a bit. He meets this other guy who plays the piano really well at this like church, and he's basically like his next spiritual or enlightenment figure to come into his life. Who further, this is where we get into this whole thing about the what was it, Iraq? Oh my gosh, why did I not write it down? The this new God that they're going to believe in, which is not actually a God. It's this new enlightenment thing that they're talking about. But I did like in his teenage years to young adult years, he was talking about how, you know, he often was feeling negative feelings and not positive feelings, but the negative feelings were a bit welcome because at least he felt something instead of being devoid of feeling, which I thought was fun. Or not fun, but I thought it was relatable. I'm going to refer to my phone for a second because that's what my next note says. So the big thing here also was combining the godlike and the devilish resounded in my ears. This was something that touched me personally. It is familiar to me from my talks with Demian in the very last stage of our friendship. Demian had then said that we most likely had a God whom we revered, but that he represented only an arbitrarily detached half of the world. This was the official, permissible, bright world, but we had to be able to revere the whole world. And so either we had to have a God who was also the devil, or else we had to establish a service of the devil alongside our divine service of God. And now then, there we go, Abraxas was the God who was both God and the devil. Now, that's too big brain for me. What I do think is interesting about that particular quote, it kind of goes back to the problem of evil. You know, if there's all this evil, then God is either allowing it, which means he's evil, or he can't stop it, which makes him not all powerful. But there's also just a third option, that he just allows it for another reason that we don't know. Doesn't necessarily mean he's evil. But what I do think is interesting is that, you know, there is evil in the world, and is there a reason for it? Does, you know, sometimes it builds character, you know, which is not fun to hear, right? But think of all the times you've grown. It wasn't when you were happy and content. It was when you were going through strife, right? So there's something to be said about that. But he hangs up this other guy. The guy continues to talk to him, and this idea of this Abraxas thing continues to grow and grow. We get to this weird part of the book where there's this infatuation between Sinclair and the mother of Demian. And then we kind of end with this crescendo where it is now World War I, I believe, and Sinclair's now in the thick of that. And at the end of it, well, but in the middle portion of this, he meets this kid who asks him a bunch of questions like he once asked Demian, and it seems to be, now, is this kid real, or is this more of him killing off the child, letting go his childhood self? That could also be the case. It's also to be said, if all these characters are just more for this philosophical ideas to spread through his mind, then at the end of the book with the whole World War I crescendo, he kind of embraces Demian, who turns out to look like him, and it's like he's accepting and embracing that. And there's also an argument to be made that maybe the mother, because there's this weird sexual stuff going on there, nothing actually happens, but either they're real and that's just weird, or it's more of this is his like feminine side as opposed to his masculine side, and I don't know. It's too big brain for me to talk about, especially at 11:23 at night. But one of the last quotes I like that I wanted to mention is, when you hate a person, what you hate in his image is something within us, within you. So if you hate someone and hate something particularly about them, it's because it's something you fear being in you or wish was in you. So I thought that was interesting. But ultimately, again, this whole book, this whole exploration, which I can only say so much, even in spoilers, like you really have to experience it for yourself to fully come to your own conclusions and your own feeling about this, is find yourself. And I think ultimately that applies to you whenever, whether you're a teenager, whether you're an adult. I think that's fundamental. I mean, even when you read this book, you're gonna have a vastly different experience from me. You're gonna have your own ideas, your own things, and that's always important, to constantly think and grow and to be kind. That's not really what this book is talking about, but I think it's always important to be kind and give people the benefit of the doubt. And I have said this before, but I think it's important to continue to display that 2026, 2025, pick your poison. Most people are decent. Most people are trying to live a good life, and they don't personally hate you. Most people are not the enemy. The world will tell you, America will tell you, that this person is the bad guy. No, this person is the bad guy. And you fight, and you clash, and there's no unity or love because you're too busy thinking each other is Satan incarnate, when it's not the case. You're all just people. Give each other some grace. Give each other some just benefit of the doubt that they are not trying to cause harm and that they genuinely just want what's best. And through so, you can actually have some really more engaging actual discussions with people, and maybe actually come to either reinforce your beliefs even stronger, or, scary, I know, maybe have a change of heart on some matters. But that only happens when you're loving and when you're able to talk to others without getting upset. And that's something that has to be built, it's something that has to be grown. But I think it is important to find yourself, whether you're religious, whether you're not. That's a constant, lifelong mission. So always keep at it. Question things, learn, grow, expand your mind, make up your own mind on things. Maybe you choose to align yourself with something. Maybe you don't. And even though, if it's become abundantly clear, I have a particular view of things when it comes to politics and whatnot, which is pretty neutral. I want people to love each other. I'm too small-brained for the bigger problems. But even if you are super passionate about something like that and you do pick a side, I would still respect you for it because you came to that conclusion on your own. But I hope no matter what you decide, no matter what you choose to put your trust in or your beliefs in or put your time and energy into, that no matter what, even if you're 100% Republican, or you're 100% liberal, or you're 100% into My Little Pony, whatever it is, that if somebody may come at a time to disagree with you, that you talk it out. Unless they're being a dick, then of course not. But if they're genuinely trying to talk to you and not, argue and fight with you, and have those conversations. Finding yourself only can happen when doubt arises. And that doesn't just mean faith. It doesn't just mean religion. It's everything. It's from your political beliefs to superficial things to books even, like we're talking about here. Talking to someone else about it can fundamentally change your perception, or maybe reinforce what you already believed. But it only comes from polite discourse. And again, I even stated at the beginning of this video that I didn't particularly love this book, and yet look what it's gotten out of me. So maybe I didn't pinpoint on the things that this book is actually talking about, and like I said, I always feel inadequate when I do these reviews. I never went to college. I'm not particularly smart. But that's where I'm at. That's what I got from it. And I want to know what you thought if you've read it. If you haven't, get back to me when you have. And keep finding yourself, and thank you for watching. And yeah, I guess I do enjoy it enough to have this kind of conversation with you all. But I enjoyed it enough, I suppose. Until next time, live long and prosper.